Thanks, and good morning, everyone. You got me earlier than expected, but hopefully it's going to be worth it. So my focus is going to be on Policy 3C, which applies to most forms of local development, and the Developing with Nature guidance that NatureScot published in its support. But first, a reminder that the planning system was already tasked with enhancing biodiversity before NPF4 came along in February. So what we are discussing is not entirely new. Scottish planning policy was encouraging of benefits of biodiversity to be sought, albeit it was worded as what I'd term a nice to have rather than a requirement. Also, many local development plans included policies seeking enhancements, such as the Aberdeen City example here. And planning authorities then, as now, had a duty to further the conservation of biodiversity under the Nature Conservation Scotland Act. But Policy 3C has certainly changed things. It's changed SPP's encouragement to a requirement. Local development will include appropriate measures, as it states, proportionate to the nature and scale of development. The only exclusions to its application are householder development, local development subject to EIA, and open water fish farms. Although this policy applies to the smaller scale of developments that we're going to be discussing today, these are by far the majority of Scottish planning applications. All development, whatever its scale, should be making a contribution to tackling the biodiversity crisis we face, so even the small scale stuff. What the policy refers to as appropriate measures are in part set out in our Developing with Nature guidance. This is available on our website, and an illustrated version is going to be released soon. This is national guidance, but it's non-statutory and not part of the development plan. In drafting it, That's hopefully got the right slide up. So in drafting it, it's been written with applicants and planning officers in mind, with the intention that it's accessible to both the lay reader and professionals. The vast majority of local development applications, we need to remember, will be without ecological expertise, and therefore it seeks to present this information in a relatively simple and hopefully engaging way. So to just take you through the guidance first sets out how to approach enhancing biodiversity alongside delivering the development. So it's all considered in the round. 7 widely applied rules are suggested to aid nature's integration with the development and maximise its contribution to delivering wider objectives. And I'm sure many of you will be familiar with these sorts of rules. So applying the mitigation hierarchy first, Cara's already touched on that. And it's only when measures result in biodiversity being left in a better state than before development that nature can be considered as enhanced. Consider biodiversity from the outset, as retention of existing is certainly better than creating new. Provide for synergies and connectivity for nature. Don't consider measures in isolation, but as a component of their setting, and seek to create functional connectivity and permeable boundaries where you can. Integrate nature for multiple benefits. This is about delivering for both people and nature together. Prioritise on-site enhancement before off-site delivery. Again, Carl's already touched on this. This is to avoid creating nature-poor areas. And for local developments, we might expect most, if not all, to be on-site, but clearly there is the option for exceptions that might go off-site. Taking a place-based and inclusive approach means reflecting the site and local priorities. It's not one size fits all. And finally, secure local enhancement. Nature is uncertain, so we need to design for resilience and plan with a contingency, be adaptive and seek to retain for the long term. The bulk of the guidance details 24 measures for enhancing nature, grouped under these three categories: planting for nature, providing homes for nature, and managing water with nature. Now, this is not an exhaustive list of all potential actions, but those considered relatively straightforward to include and widely applicable across much of Scotland. Their complexity ranges for something as simple as creating a log or leaf pile, through planting a meadow or orchard, to constructing a green wall or living roof. The intention is to demonstrate that any development can do something positive for nature if considered from an early stage. Opportunities include not just the garden and green space elements, but also the buildings and structures to be built, the borders and boundaries dividing the site, and the management of rain and surface water. Early consideration should ensure nature is integrated rather than a bolt-on to the development and can maximise its contribution to delivering wider benefits. For each of the measures, the guidance sets out 7 topics in a standard format. So there's firstly a short description of what the measure actually comprises, then an overview of the benefits it provides for nature, so why we're doing it, the key requirements for successfully implementing the measure. There's no point putting a measure in place if you haven't got the right situation and conditions for it. A description of the future management effort that is required, which may be pretty minimal, or in some of them it's a bit more complex. It identifies other measures that it potentially complements to prompt what should also be considered alongside that measure. There are what we've called nature notes, providing some supporting more general biodiversity information about that particular measure. And finally, web links to further information. The guidance itself does not seek to duplicate where more detailed design and management advice, which is well presented elsewhere. To help with selecting the measures most suited to the development and provide confidence that they will be successful as well as maximise their benefits, a checklist of 6 ecological factors and 4 practical factors are set out in the guidance. The ecological considerations include thinking about local native species, providing for connectivity, allowing space for nature to adapt, which is increasingly relevant in the face of climate change. Taking account of synergies with other measures, for example, it's no use providing shelter and nest sites if there's no food source, and providing multiple units, such as clusters of swift boxes. The practical considerations include how nature and people will interact once the development is occupied. This is to avoid disturbance and conflict where possible. How longer term management will be guaranteed should also be considered. And identifying any opportunities for local community involvement in the implementation of the measure, whether at installation stage, through its seasonal management, or ongoing surveys. And finally, delivering wider benefits at the same time, such as water and temperature regulation and other nature-based solutions that the biodiversity measures can provide. These considerations should all be informed by supporting plans and strategies where they're available, particularly any LBAPs, but also the Regional Spatial Strategy and LDP, Green Network, Open Space or Forest and Woodland strategies. In the CSGN area, you've got habitat connectivity mapping, and most of Scotland has local biological or environmental record information available. I noted earlier that the policy requires that measures should be proportionate to the nature and scale of development. This is going to be a planning judgment, but the guidance does suggest 5 considerations to help inform this. The location of the development, By that, we're thinking peri-urban and rural sites are likely to provide more opportunity than a small, densely developed urban site. The character and scale of development. Does it include green space or predominantly buildings? Even if the choice of measures is limited, many can be replicated. Future management requirements, such as the effort and the cost, need to be considered. And whilst these are relevant, they should not be the determining factor. Consideration of the biodiversity lost as a result of the development, and this should include species richness, rarity of these species, and if what is lost supports species found in few other habitats. And the time and uncertainty in delivering benefits. The longer the time scale or greater the uncertainty in delivering enhancement, the larger the ask should be. To support the need for a clear but proportionate approach, the guidance includes a suggested template for the applicant to present the information, demonstrating that they are in fact enhancing biodiversity. Importantly, this seeks to distinguish between those actions simply mitigating impacts, if you like, the business as usual approach we've had, from those contributing to enhancement to reflect the new policy focus. And just to note that the version in the guidance also includes prompts in each of the boxes to help a non-specialist complete it. Finally, some thoughts on the challenges we will need to continue to work at if we want to be confident that we are delivering biodiversity enhancement alongside development under Policy 3C. First, have we got all of the necessary supporting framework in place? As Cara's mentioned, further guidance is coming from government on Policy 3 and also from ourselves on nature networks. Other aspects that need consideration are how well existing LBAPs, as well as other supporting documents such as forestry and woodland strategies, can best support decisions about what enhancements should be delivered. Secondly, how can we best build the capacity required that enables development with nature? There's no simple answer when resources around the planning system are very constrained, and I don't need to tell you that. But tackling this is required if biodiversity enhancement is an essential rather than a nice to have element of development. Events like this are at a start, and the industry also has an important role to play. Both individual developers and bodies such as the construction sector's supply chain school. We will need to be better at sharing and learning from each other as we gain experience with the new policy. Third, how do we ensure what is planned for and consented is delivered and delivered well? Our experience is that implementation requires improvement, and these concerns are recognised by both the industry and planners such as yourselves. We need to do better to ensure existing biodiversity on site is protected in practice, that what is promised in the application is actually delivered, and that it is done well. This is not just about enforcement, but improving understanding of what is good practice and raising expectations of what is required. And fourth, how do we ensure that all the effort at the planning stage results in a lasting legacy? Reversing biodiversity loss isn't just for this year or even the next 5, but needs to be permanent. England has developed an approach that requires biodiversity gain to be locked in for at least 30 years. What should Scotland's timescale be? Do we have the right mechanisms to achieve this and an approach that provides confidence in the outcomes to be delivered, yet provides flexibility to respond to the impact of climate change, diseases, or future new development? I'm sure you'll have more challenges to add to these, and to be honest, we don't have all the answers yet. To conclude, I'd say the nature crisis presents us with a significant challenge, and development has an important contribution to make towards addressing this. We know what needs to be done, and NPF4 provides very strong support, that's needed to push for this extra effort that's now required. But if we are to meet the government targets of halting biodiversity decline by 2030 and restoring and regenerating biodiversity by 2045, we will all need to push for more and better. Thank you.